So Ahmad and Musab, two survivors from the 14th of June collapse of the capsizing of the fishing boat with 700 people in it, have now spoken to the press, and the story they give is contradictory of the story that was put out by the Greek press. And the Greek press was very keen to celebrate the fact that they had captured 9 Egyptian smugglers on board when the boat sank, and a translator called Fahzad Khavand confirms that this is fairly routine, that people are forced to be identified, and then the blame is pinned on them. And Ahmad and Musab explained that the coastguard caused the sinking of the boat, and they, along with many others, were left for several hours in the water, although the coastguard was there, and they saw the incident, and they were silenced by the coastguard. And when they were rescued, they were told they should be grateful that they hadn't died. They were scared, and they were scared that they would also be accused like the Egyptians. And Ahmad's younger brother is among those presumed dead. And the way it happened, apparently, is that the Coast Guard tied a rope to the boat and pulled it. It capsized. It was the second time they tried pulling the boat. The first time the rope broke. And none of this is in the court documents, which say that the Coast Guard approached as the ship was sinking, and the ship was on its way to Italy, whereas in fact the BBC have demonstrated that the ship was stationary for many hours. The 2 victims say that the Egyptians became scapegoats to hide the Coast Guard offence. And the translator, Fahzin, confirms that this has happened with other boats. He was translating for a boat that was in difficulty last year, coming directly from Turkey, and he says that 2 innocent Iranian victims were identified as smugglers. They eventually paid bail and were released, and the case collapsed. From my experience, I was involved in a case with my partner. My partner was on a boat in 2001, and the case eventually got to court because we left Greece. We were pursued by people with guns who wanted to silence us. They'd silenced every other person who was involved in trying to bring the case to the European Court of Human Rights. They were bribed with passports, with cars. They were threatened. We had people come round to the house with guns. And as I say, we escaped and still went on and brought the case. It was partly helped by the fact that I spoke a bit of Greek, and I was fully aware that the translators were translating something that was not being said by my partner. The translators were complicit in the attempted stitch-up. As I say, bribery was blatant. The verdicts were relying on very questionable testimony, and the whole thing was highly faulty. We should contrast what happened to the 700 victims of the fishing boat with the huge money and resources that were put out to find the victims of the Titan submersible disaster. About the same sort of time, 14th of June, and it's simply shocking, but Greece has form, and this sort of thing has been going on since at least the the beginning of the century. And I certainly called it out. The European Court of Human Rights found in our favour and demanded the Greek government make changes to 3 or 4 different laws, and as far as I know, no changes have taken place. I certainly have no intention of visiting Greece until those changes occur. And I don't intend to keep my mouth shut. The Greek coastguard have behaved appallingly. In the case of my partner, once my partner and I think about 150 migrants were detained and locked up in a disused school. A number of them were tortured and raped for no reason other than the fact they were held in captivity. And we know the identity of the 2 people who did that to my partner, Zandoulakis and Vardakis, and they got off with very small fines. And I suppose I know a good deal about that because I spoke to the prosecutor's office and they assumed I was a local talking in support of Zandoulakis and Vardakis, and I didn't suggest that I was not. But it was extraordinary how they assumed that anybody who spoke Greek would support the Coast Guard. And this is a conspiracy of silence by the Coast Guard and their supporters. And this Coast Guard is also central to the workings of Frontex, which is the European Organisation for Border Control, for maritime border control, utterly questionable. And we, in the UK, Suella Braverman, is inspired by the Greek example of pushbacks, of which this is a very good example, a typical example. It involves death, it involves danger, and it involves deceit. The 3 Ds: death, danger, deceit. And if that is what we are signing up for, I don't think that is good.